Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're going to read about Srila Prabhupada today. And I think the best thing to do is, shall we pass the book round and let everybody have a read? What do you think?
It's okay.
Okay. So this is Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, and the part of the Lilamrita we're reading from is A Resident of Vrindavan. One night Abai had a striking dream, the same dream he had had several times before. During his days as a householder, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur appeared just as Abai had known him, the tall, scholarly sannyas, coming directly from the spiritual world. From Krishna's personal entourage, he called Abai and indicated that he should follow. Repeatedly, he called and motioned. He was asking Abai to take sannyas. Come, he urged, become a sannyasi. Abai awoke in a state of wonder. He thought of this instruction as another feature of the original instructions of Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur had given him at their first meeting in Calcutta. The same instruction that his spiritual master had later solidified in a letter, become an English preacher and spread Krishna consciousness throughout the Western world. Sannyas was for that end. Otherwise, why should his spiritual master asked him to accept? Abai reasoned that his spiritual master was saying, now take sannyas and you will actually be able to accomplish this mission. Formally, the time was not right. Abai deliberated cautiously. By accepting sannyas, a Vaishnava dedicates his body, mind and words totally to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Renouncing all other engagements, he was doing that already. Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati had offered sannyas to his leading disciples so that they could continue his mission. They hadn't done it. Preaching in the West had proven perilous even for the Gaudiya mass, most recognized sannyasis. How could he, a mere householder, presume he could succeed where the others had failed? He was hesitant. The helpless, incapable feeling he had expressed in his Viraha Astaka was there. But now his spiritual master was beckoning him. Over all other considerations, he was beckoning him over all other considerations, even over natural humility. Now, although he was elderly and alone, the desire to preach, just as his spiritual master had preached, remained with him. A fierce, though sometimes quietly expressed determination. So Prabhupada said, the common understanding is that he was horrified when Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur told him to take sannyas. And he said, but I heard one lecture, or one, he was speaking, I don't know whether it was a morning walk or but he was speaking, he was saying, it wasn't that I was frightened of taking sannyas, I was frightened of the consequences of leaving his family in that difficult situation. So I'd always thought he was actually, he said, oh, how horrible. I thought he was thinking out to leave family life and, you know, be alone. And I thought he was thinking like that, but he wasn't. He was actually ready for it, in other words, but the consequences would be that a lot of people would suffer. I did read somewhere where when he took sannyas, he went to the Calcutta mat and he stayed there for some time, and he was chanting continuous japa to, you know, try and get over the emotional situation. But I can't remember where I've read that, but that's what I did read somewhere. Would anybody else like to say anything?
So it is said that without taking sannyas, you had to take sannyas in order to preach efficiently. I understand that for India.
Yeah.
But in the West, it's not necessary that, you know, somebody will leave his family alone behind and become a monk will be more accepted like that. In the West, within the preaching movement of ISKCON, yes. But for people in general, if somebody says, oh, I'm a monk, but I have a wife and children, I left them behind. In the West, may not be so glorified. Take something.
He's a Swami with a family.
Try to defend my case.
Over Swami.
So, what do you think?
I think the same, and that's what I thought. That, you know, why sannyas to come to America and to, you know, the West and Europe to preach to people who don't even know what sannyas is, you know. But it does have an effect on people, actually. You know, when somebody's presented as a renunciant, as a monk, people, they tend to be, even though they're not part of the culture, they seem to show respect for that. So that's my realization anyway.
Is it? I read somewhere else that when he took sannyas, he went to Mathura and initiated quite a few persons, and even the sannyas guru was quite amazed how you initiated so early. Have you heard that?
I know in the Lilamrita it says he initiated one person, Prabhakar.
Yeah, that was way before,
Yeah.
in 54. But I read also, right upon taking sannyas, upon going to Mathura, for a program, he initiated a few guys.
Really?
And even his guru was a bit taken aback. And sannyas guru.
I've never heard that. Where did you?
Same, I forgot where.
Eh?
Must have been Gaudiya or something.
No, I just heard about something, they call him what, Prabhakar.
Yeah, Prabhakar, yeah, that's one of his things. In the 50s.
He helped him a little bit, but Prabhupada wasn't really satisfied. And so then he just tried to make his way to the Western world to preach. The Vedic standard and the example set by the previous acharyas was that if one wanted to lead a preaching movement, sannyas was required. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had taken sannyas to facilitate his missionary work. Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas to further the Sankirtan movement. Of course, Lord Chaitanya was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When his young students had been disrespectful towards him, treating him as an ordinary man, he had taken sannyas. Because a sannyasi is automatically respected, Lord Chaitanya's acceptance of sannyas was a calculated tactic As soon as he began travelling throughout India as a sannyasi, he immediately attracted thousands of followers to the Sankirtan movement. Knowing that many cheaters would accept the saffron dress and abuse the respect given to a sannyasi, Lord Chaitanya had advised against accepting sannyas in the age of Kali. He knew that cheaters in the guise of sadhus would act immorally, accumulate funds for their own sense gratification, and make many followers simply to enhance their own prestige. Posing as swamis, they would cheat the public. Because the people of Kali Yuga are unable to follow the rules and regulations of sannyas, Lord Chaitanya recommended that they simply chant Hare Krishna. However, if a person could actually follow the rules, and especially if he had to spread the Sankirtan movement, sannyas was necessary. So, there is actually a statement, a verse in the Gita, 5 things are prohibited in the age of Kali, and one of them is sannyas. And but that's the traditional sannyas. And one reason is that people were misusing the ashram. Prabhupada gave an example of a person who used to, he had a business, he used to go to work. And then when he came on, he'd change into sannyas outfit and go to the Howrah station and beg. Then when he'd beg something, he'd go and eat in the restaurant. So this was going on, and that's why it was actually wasn't accepted. But if we're, in our line at that time and previous to it, there was many sannyasis. Madhavendra Puri, Ishvara Puri. So it wasn't that it was just to stop that cheating of the ashram. And people think traditional sannyasis, just trying to renounce everything. So, but here it says that especially for preaching, and that falls in line with the philosophy, doesn't it? The 4 stages of sannyas: Bahudak, Kutichak, Paribhajakacharya and Paramahamsa, gradually renouncing until, Paribhajakacharya preaching. And then at that time in India they would even renounce that. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he wasn't a sannyasi, but he took Babaji at the end of his life, even though he was preaching so vigorously, just like a sannyasi. But Prabhupada, he came to the West, and he sort of preaching up to the end. So that was, an indication to his disciples. He probably weren't qualified for Babaji at that time. Prabhupada did give Babaji once or twice, didn't he? Would anybody else like to read? Abai first had to approach one of his godbrothers for permission. He had decided to turn to Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj, formerly Kunja Vihari, the leader of the Chaitanya Mat in Calcutta. Abai still thought of the Chaitanya Mat as the headquarters of his spiritual master's mission. During the heated legal disputes, the Chaitanya Mat had been the most prized acquisition, and since 1948 it had been under the legal ownership of Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj. Now, although each sannyasi had his own place or places, the Chaitanya Mat and Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj legally represented the Gaudiya Mat entity. Abai felt that if he was to take sannyas and to preach in America, he would give the Chaitanya Mat the first opportunity to support his work. In April 1959, Abai wrote to Tirtha Maharaj, inquiring about sannyas and the Chaitanya Mat. In April 1959, Abai wrote to Tirtha Maharaj inquiring about sannyas and the Chaitanya Mat's printing some of his manuscripts. And since no one was going abroad, he volunteered to do so on behalf of the Chaitanya Mat. Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj replied that Abai should first join the Chaitanya Mat. He mentioned the strife that still lingered. Those who are acting against Chaitanya Mat, they are motivated by their own individual ambitions. Anyone who was against the Chaitanya Mat, he said, was actually illogically and against the instructions of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So according to Tirtha Maharaj, the thing for Abai to do, the thing that he had neglected to do for so many years, was to join the Chaitanya Mat and act under his direction. Tirtha Maharaj mentioned several members of the Chaitanya Mat who had recently accepted sannyas order, and he said that Abai should also become one. In time he invited Abai to come reside at the Chaitanya Mat. The houses that we have, there are rooms that are airy and well lit. We will treat you exclusively. There won't be any difficulty. You will take care that we will take care that no inconvenience occurs. But as for printing books, then there's a quote. We are eagerly awaiting to print the books like Satsangarbha Vedanta, based on devotional service, and many other rare books by the Goswamis. First we will print them. Books written by you will be checked by the editorial staff. And if the funds can be raised, then they can be printed according to priority. The books will be printed only if they are favourable for the service of the Chaitanya Mat. Therefore, if the fund is raised, then there is a plan to go abroad as well. Abai was not encouraged. The main difficulty, he said, was the Chaitanya Mat's shortage of funds. Srila Prabhupada. I was working with my broken typewriter. I went to our Tirtha Maharaj. You give me a room and print my books. Give me some money, I will join you. I had thought, this is Guru Maharaj's institution. He did not say no, but the printing of books was a difficult task for him. He had no money, he was hardly collecting or maintaining printing of books. Printing of books is a big job and there is no guarantee of sale. Without printing books and going to the West, sannyas did not have meaning for Abai. And who knew when Tirtha Maharaj would sanction his taking sannyas? There was no point in going to Calcutta just to reside in an airy, well-lit room that he had already in Vrindavan. Abai wrote back to Tirtha Maharaj mentioning his direct order from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to preach to the English-speaking people. He wanted to go to the West right away, and he had thought the Chaitanya Mat would welcome his offer. Both Abai and Tirtha Maharaj had their responsibilities, but perhaps they could work together to carry out the desire of his spiritual master. Abai asked Tirtha Maharaj to reconsider. On May 7th, 1959, Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj wrote back, my suggestion is don't make any hasty decisions. For the time being, you stay with us and engage yourself in the service of the society, and then accept Sri Dandi Sannyas. The purpose of accepting Sri Danda is to serve the society. If that is your desire, then Sri Chaitanya Mat will decide about your going to America to preach and make all arrangements. It can never be a principle of the society to let one act according to his individual attempt or desire. The society will decide after consulting with the heads what is to be done by whom. This is what I want to say. First of all, it is necessary to identify oneself with the society. In order to preach in America or in both foreign countries, or in other foreign countries, it is important to have dignified organisation in the background. And secondly, it is necessary to establish oneself in India before going to preach in the foreign countries. Now it is that there are no conferences or meetings in the West as before. Communication is done through the media of television. There's quite a bit extra. I've read this before, but I can't remember reading so much detail. Actually, it may be a warning to our movement. You know, it's become, you know, its organisation has to be there, otherwise, you know, it'll be difficult to actually get everybody to work together. But sometimes it's a little difficult to get things done as a result. Has anybody else noticed that?
Yes.
Definitely.
You know, Prabhupada, he had the ability to let people feel, just, you know, he used to say to him, Prabhupada, I'd like to do this, you know, he'd say, do it. You know. So he had that spirit of, if anybody wants to do anything, let him do it. But now you've got to jump through so many hoops before you can do things sometimes. And Abhay could understand the need and priorities of the Chaitanya Mat, but he could not allow them to overrule what he had considered the highest mandate, preaching as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had ordered. Abhay had offered his services to the leaders of the Chaitanya Mat, thinking they might also see things his way. He thought that with the world's crying need for Krishna consciousness staring them in the face, they might see that this Abhay Babu was convinced and enthusiastic, and so should be sent right away with whatever he required, but they had other priorities. Abhay next turned to Keshava Maharaj in Mathura, and Keshava Maharaj told Abhay to take sannyas immediately. After corresponding with Tirtha Maharaj, Abhay felt that some uncertainty about accepting sannyas. He felt some uncertainty. And now that he was being encouraged so strongly, he resisted. But Keshava Maharaj was insistent. Srila Prabhupada, I was sitting alone in Vrindavan writing to my godbrothers. I was sitting alone in Vrindavan writing. My godbrothers insisted to me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you must do it. Without accepting the renounced order of life, nobody can become a preacher. So he insisted. He practically, my spiritual master insisted. He wanted me to become a preacher, so he forced me through this godbrother. You accept. So unwillingly, I accepted. Kesavaji Gaudiya Mat was located in the midst of one of the Mat's downtown bazaars. Its main entrance and arched doorway led into a courtyard open to the sky through the metal grating above. The architecture was similar to that of the Vamsi Gopalji temple. The atmosphere was secluded as in a monastery. Abhay was a familiar, welcome figure here. He had written and studied in the library here, edited the Gaudiya Patrika, and donated the deity of Lord Chaitanya, who stood on the altar beside the deities of Radha and Krishna, Sri Radha Vinod Vihari. But his visit during September 1959 was not an ordinary one. He entered the mat dressed in white, Abhay Babu, but he would soon be leaving dressed in saffron as Swami. Abhay had been living as a renunciant for 9 years. There was no need for him to observe a ceremony or to proclaim himself a sadhu by changing to saffron dress. But it was the parampara system that a man take Tridandi sannyas at the end of his life. He was aware of the cheating sannyasis. Even in Vrindavan, he had seen so-called sadhus who did not preach but simply spent their days hunting for chapatis. Some swamis of Vrindavan even indulged illicitly in what they had supposedly come here to reject, sex life. Such persons were making a mockery of sannyas, and there were the caste Goswamis also, who lived like ordinary householders, running temples as a business to support their families and accepting honour and donations from the public on the false basis of birth. Abhay knew of these abuses of sannyas, but he also knew the real purpose of sannyas. Sannyas was for preaching. On the morning of September 17, 1959, in the 50 by 25 foot deity room on the second floor of the Keshavaji mat, a group of devotees sat before the deities of Radha Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. The deities were colourfully dressed in royal clothing and silver crowns. Radha on his right hand faced palm forward in benediction for the worshipper. At her side, her left hand held a flower for Krishna. Krishna stood like a dancer, placing his right leg in a casual tiptoe pose before his left, playing his long silver flute, which he had held gracefully to his red lips. His long black hair reached down past his shoulders, and the garland of marigolds around his neck reached down to his knees. On his right stood the deity of Lord Chaitanya, his right arm raised, left arm at his side, his body straight, feet together. He was a soft golden colour, and he had large eyes, a well-formed red mouth, and straight white hair down to his shoulders. One level below the deities were pictures of spiritual masters in disciplic succession: Jagannath Das Babaji, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Gauri Kishore Das Babaji, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, Bhakti Pragyan Keshwar Maharaj. Abhay sat on a mat of kusha grass beside 90-year-old Sanatan, also to receive sannyas that day. Sitting opposite the two candidates, Narayan Maharaj, Keshwar Maharaj's disciple, prepared to conduct the ceremony of mantras and offering of grains and ghee into the fire. Akinchana Das Babaji, Abhay's godmother, known for his sweet singing, played mridanga and sang Vaishnava bhajans. Sitting on a raised asan, His Holiness Keshwar Maharaj presided. Since there had been no notices or interventions, only the mat's few residents attended. Narayan Maharaj chanted the required mantras and then sat back silently with Keshwar Maharaj while Keshwar Maharaj lectured. Then, to everyone's surprise, Keshwar Maharaj asked Abhay to speak. Abhay had not expected this. As he looked around at the gathering of devotees, he understood that the common language was Hindi. Only Keshwar Maharaj and a few others spoke English, yet he knew he must speak in English. After Abhay's speech, each initiate received his sannyas danda, traditional head-high staff made of 4 bamboo rods bound together and completely enwrapped in saffron cloth. They were given their sannyas garments, 1 piece of saffron cloth for a dhoti, 1 for a top piece, and 2 strips for underwear. They also received tulasi neck beads and sannyas mantra. Keshav Maharaj said that Abai would now be known as Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, and that Sanatan would be Muni Maharaj. After the ceremony, two new sannyasis posed for a photo, standing on either side of their sannyas guru, who sat in a chair. Keshav Maharaj didn't impose any restrictions on Abai. He simply encouraged him to go on preaching. Yet Abai knew that to become A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami did not mean merely that he was giving up family, home, comforts and business that he had done 5 years ago, changing from white to saffron cloth, from Abba Bamus to Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, had a special significance. It was the mandate he had required, the irrevocable commitment. Now it was only a matter of time before Bhaktivedanta Swami would travel to the west as Bhaktivedanta Saraswati had ordained. This was Bhaktivedanta Swami's realization of his new sannyas status. The Gaudiya Patrika's account of the sannyas initiation included a biographical sketch of Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, listing the major events of his life. The article concluded, seeing his enthusiasm and ability to write articles in Hindi, English and Bengali, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj gave him the instruction to take Tridandi Sannyas. For nearly 1 year he had been ready to accept sannyas. In the month of Bhadra, on the day on which Vishwarup accepted sannyas, Bhaktivedanta Swami of the Sri Keshava Gaudiya Math accepted sannyas from the founder of the Vedanta Samiti, Bhakti Pragyam Keshava Maharaj. Seeing and accept his ashram of renunciation, seeing this pastime for accepting the renounced order of life, we have attained great affection and enthusiasm. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Anything you want to say?
The parallel would have when Lord Krishna left the world, he told would have take sannyas, and saying Buddha didn't want to take sannyas. So there's a parallel there. And finally he took sannyas because Krishna ordered him.
And he said the same thing, Oliver. You know, it's okay if I may be able to take it, but you know, I'm preaching to people who won't be able to take it. What do I do? And he started talking about the Avanti Brahman, didn't he? Or the, not the Avanti Brahman, the Avadut. Now we had 24 gurus. So people will learn that way. Well, he went to Badrika Ashram, didn't he? And he started preaching to the sages there, so they would preach.
On the way he met with...
Eh?
On the way to Badrika Ashram he met with Vidu.
Yeah. Would anybody else like to say anything? Anyway, so it's been successful so far. But Prabhupada did say that he only completed half his mission, that he hadn't installed or implemented Varnashram Dham. I mean, so New Mayapur is a perfect place to do that. You know, it's away from the general hustle and bustle of the cities. And because Varnashram really I don't know how it'll be implemented in the modern cities, you know what I mean, properly. I mean, it probably can be, yeah, but it's difficult to understand how. So, you know, places like New Mayapur and New Rajdan in Hungary, and they can be examples and role models, and a place where, you know, people can come and learn the art of living a natural way of life. Varnashram College, part of Varnashram College.
Dr. Raghav Maharaj has a lot of insights on this.
Bhakti who?
Dr. Raghav Maharaj. He took a PhD on Varnashram. He came here. Well, he talked about implementing Varnashram Dharma.
Mm. Yeah, it's happening. It's happening. Slowly but surely. There's also in India, Bhakti Vikas Maharaj in what's that place? Salem. New Vrindavan.
Maybe we should work on some very basics. Speaking about Varnashram, maybe we should just work on the very basics of not divorcing, for example. Staying together, man and husband, man and wife. The very basic things we can't do. And we speak very high philosophy, but we cannot do the very basics of human life. I think that's we have to work on first. What it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. We think we are all equal, for example, also.
Yeah, I mean, that's the purity is the force, isn't it? Purity is the force. So, you know, the Prabhupada said that many times, didn't he? He said if you chant Hare Krishna mantra with attention and follow the principles, then, you know, that's the formula for being successful in everything we do. Because if we become purified, then, you know, Krishna can work through us without us being affected. But does that mean that, you know, somebody who's got a natural propensity to work with his hands will become a great scholar? There's that as well, isn't there? We're also advised in Bhagavad Gita to follow, we said it the other day about following our particular natural inclinations to do service. And Prabhupada said that, didn't he? He said, don't try to learn something new. Just whatever you're good at, just do it for Krishna. Anyway, you know, I think the movement now, we're getting a higher quality of devotee coming. Well, not necessarily, but I mean, Prabhupada's devotees, they were all actually intelligent people, you know. They were really intelligent. They were actually sons of big tycoon businessmen and people who were actually been successful in society, but they rejected it. So they weren't ordinary people. And then we went through a phase in the 70s, in the 80s, where there was a big influx of young men, but, you know, from all different categories. A lot would just actually, and there was a big turnover, a lot came and a lot went. When I was on the Brahmachari ashram when I joined, I went to Chaitanya College, and there was a Bhakti course here, and there was nearly 25 to 30 Bhaktas, and then there were about 15 Bhaktins. But now it's not like that. If you get one or two Bhaktas, you're doing well. But I noticed that they tend not to actually become brahmacharis so much. They get trained up and they get married, a lot of them. So there's not so many now. But the quality is they're more they're professional people. You know, they're going to be professional people. A lot of them come to Bhaktivedanta Manor. They're young Indians who've got the degree or the masters, and then they go on the Bhakti course and get fixed up in the standard, and then they get married. One or two stay. So things are changing, aren't they? I used to think when I first joined the temple, I thought, how can everybody live in the temple? You know, I couldn't work it out because everything was temple orientated, and if you left the temple, then you'd bloat. And I couldn't get my head around it. But you know, we've had to due to School of Hard Knocks, things have moved on, and the movement tends to stay in one place, not training people up. Now we have to start doing the training. This is the hard work, isn't it? It is the Moda goodness. Moda Passion means making devotees, but now we're actually keeping them and training them. That's the real Brahminical work. Okay.
Yeah, Jayapatika Maharaja says only 1% of devotees worldwide live in the temple.
Only 1%?
Of devotees worldwide live in the temple. 1%. So it's becoming like Christianity. The monks are just tiny percentage. Christianity is out there, not in the temple. It's becoming like that.
Well, I noticed actually, I don't know whether you noticed in France that a lot of devotees, they're sort of doing things spontaneously themselves. You know, they're not being frustrated, they just go ahead and do it. And it's become more spontaneous like that in some ways. Is that happening in France as well? So, is that a healthy thing? I'll have to wait and see. I mean, it's healthy in that devotees are actually helping to spread Krishna consciousness. And we have to see how things work out. Anything else?
Maybe it's the usual question, how did you get in contact with the Hare Krishna movement?
How do you stay in contact?
How did you came in contact?
How did I come? It's a long story. I first saw the devotees at Rath Yatra. I was in my house, you know, at home, and my father shouted him into the other room where the television was. So I went in, and it was the 6 o'clock news. And what I saw on television, I saw all these shaven-headed monks chanting and dancing in the middle of Trafalgar Square. And there was a huge cart behind them. And I said, where do they come from? And father said, they come from India. I said, they're white. They were actually Westerners. That's how, that was the first contact. Then a few months later I saw them on top of the pops. It was, in at number 10 is the Radha Krishna temple with the Hare Krishna mantra. So that, you know, that had some effect on me, it made an impression. Then I got a book about 7 years later. I tried to read it and I couldn't read it. I started to go towards atheism because I realised that in Christianity nobody's following anyway. So then years later, about 6 or 7 years later, I had the choice of going, you know, for a drink or reading this book. I become fed up with both things, you know. I thought, which will be the most painful, read that book or... So I read the book and then, you know, it made a big effect. Science of self-realization. And then everything else stemmed from that. I started contacting the temple. They sent me more books and eventually I started visiting, and after about a year I moved into the temple. What about yourself? Okay, I think everybody's ready for prasadam. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada taking 3 dandi sannyas ki jai. Gaur Premanandi.
Dayananada ki jai.